Hey folks, Brendan from Bluelight here. Now today I'm going to be talking in the main to the serving officers among you. Although if you are someone who's aspiring to join the police, you might find this video of interest, because I'm going to talk to you about the connection between research into strategic management and police canteens. And some of you might be thinking, there are no more police canteens. Yes, exactly. And now listening, it will all make sense, trust me, it will all make sense as we go through this video. And the reason why I'm doing this is because quite a few of you who want to get promoted to sergeant, and a few of you want to get promoted from sergeant to inspector, have asked me on my thoughts in respect of the competence of being emotionally aware. Now that's from the Competency and Values Framework. There it is with some of my scribbly notes on it. And what this talks about is that the behaviours it's looking for is how you consider the perspectives of people from a wide range of backgrounds before you take any action. You adapt your style and approach according to the needs of the people you're working with. You promote a culture that values diversity and encourages challenge. You encourage reflective practice among others and take the time to support others to understand reactions and behaviours. You take responsibility for helping to ensure the emotional well-being of those in your teams, and you take responsibility to deal with any inappropriate behaviours. Now, those of you who've been in touch with me have said that this is a really, really difficult one to understand. I can see where you're coming from as well, because this behaviour is not describing any form of anything you can put down to a process, anything that you can have a system for dealing with. It's not as if when you do X, you will get Y. This is about the style of your communication as a leader and how you listen to people carefully and pay attention to what's going on your team and in the teams that you work with. So I'll come to the connection with police canteens in a moment. Actually, I'm going to connect all of this with Sunday morning breakfasts and kebab camaraderie. There you go. Hopefully that's got you even more intrigued. What? Strategic management, police canteens, kebab camaraderie and Sunday morning breakfasts? What's he on about? So I started digging away thinking about how do we deal with the conflicting and complex needs that individuals have, especially in police teams where there's a huge amount of change. And a lot of that change may cause anxiety and feelings that we're not aware of unless we explore them. So how are we going to explore those feelings? How are we going to explore those anxieties? How are we going to pay attention to what is going on in our team? And so I took a look at some of the theories around strategic management, in particular in respect of complexity and change. And that led me to a really interesting bit of dialogue in an interview with a chap called Chris Moles, who's a professor of strategic management at Hertfordshire University, runs a doctorate in complexity, if you can have such a thing. Now, the language he uses, I think, is overly complex. He starts off by saying that we should keep complexity complex. Well, I think that's all well and good if you're an academic and you understand. I mean, quite honestly, some of the phrases he used, I just didn't understand them. And it often baffles me as to why people who have got titles like doctor and professor seem to think it's okay to use language that other managers, who the theories seem to be directed towards, aren't going to understand. So that, I don't know if Chris will ever watch this, but there's my challenge back. The people who you're trying to support don't understand you. I kind of understand you, but only after discussing some of what was discussed in this dialogue with one of my good friends who's a bit of an expert in organisational development. So big shout out to Tony Nichols from Maven for supporting me in understanding some of this. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to translate some of this really interesting research and Chris Mole's and others' thoughts on complexity, on conflict, on managing teams into something that you will understand. And that's not to say that, oh, you're police officers, so you understand any complex academic theories. But honestly, I've studied up to master's level and I got a bit lost. I think by starting off by saying, let's keep complexity complex is probably, I don't know, a form of elitism in many ways, in that what you're saying is that we shouldn't try to simplify things in such a way that managers on the ground, in police force, in the NHS, in private industry, in social services, that we shouldn't be translating it into something that they understand. They've got to come and do our doctorate to understand it. I don't agree. But I did like some of the dialogue and some of what Chris Moles has to say. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a discussion about a discussion, if that makes sense. A discussion about a discussion, so that we can actually think about ways in which we hit level 2 of being emotionally aware in the Competency and Values Framework. So just to remind you, this is about reflective practice, ensuring the emotional well-being of those in your teams, promoting a culture that values diversity and encourages challenge, adapting your style and approach according to the needs of your people on your team, and considering their perspectives, especially if people have got a wide range of backgrounds. So listen in. I think you might find this of interest. So the dialogue, there's all my notes, by the way. I'm going to try and translate all of that into something that makes sense for you. So, and then I'm going to talk to you about, probably in a separate video, and probably in the In-Force Advancement Group, about how you would actually do this. So if this is the what I'm talking about here, the how you would do it, and the practical tools that you can adopt now and try out now with your teams to develop this type of behavior, so you can talk about it eloquently at an interview, or you can talk about how you would do something at an interview because you've already done it. I think it'll be something really, really useful for you. So some of the things that really hit me about what Chris said was, one of the things he said was that you might be in charge, but you're not in control. So we do live in a complex world, and especially in the police service, where just about everything you do is in collaboration with other people, either other officers from different departments or other agencies, such as housing associations, social services, mental health teams, drug and alcohol addiction teams, a huge wide range of organisations that all have their own competing values, their competing aims and outcomes that they're trying to achieve. And so a lot of what we deal with is hugely complex. One of the In-Force Advancement Group members has highlighted to me a complex situation that she's got in respect of a woman who's homeless, and she just can't seem to get agencies to get involved. It's a wicked problem. When I say wicked problem, I mean it's so complex that you've got to be highly intelligent and highly experienced in dealing with that sort of issue, just to be able to stand there and say, I don't know what to do next. Really, really difficult, complex problems. And that's the world we're in at the moment. So as a manager, you might be thinking, well, it's my job to be in control and to deliver solutions. But the thing is, you can't. You can't force people to work towards an outcome. You've got to try and find a way to guide them and support them and enable them and create the conditions that are going to enable those individuals on your team who are highly professional, highly capable individuals, highly capable of making their own decisions and coming up with their own solutions. But as soon as you try and take control, you're going to find that you're not. And I discovered this as a sergeant, I discovered this as an inspector, especially in neighbourhood policing, where I discovered that actually I'm in control of very, very little. Very, very little. All I can do is influence and nudge and enable and support. And if I can do that well, we're probably going to achieve things. And the other thing that I discovered, and I reflected on this, was creating time and space to talk. Creating time and space to talk and to pay attention to what is in that talk. More about that in a moment. So I think there's something here about being comfortable with uncertainty. That's some of the things that Chris Moles talked about, and with not being in control. And it took me a while to get used to that, especially in neighbourhood policing, where I'd come from response policing, which is very much a sort of command and control role as an inspector. And then moving into neighbourhood policing, I suddenly found that sort of command and control approach, and that's one that we're all used to, because that's what we grow up in, if I can use that phrase, in policing. So it's very difficult, I think, for us to nudge ourselves into a space where we are, we might be in charge, but not in control. So what Chris Moles talks about is that managers should organise and lead with humility. Sometimes you're going to get some of what you want, sometimes you're going to get some of what you don't want, and sometimes you're going to get stuff you don't expect. And that links in beautifully and wonderfully with the concept of wicked problems. Now, if you're interested, I'll talk about that in a separate video. So that process of getting things done, Chris talks about, can cause some anxiety, especially within the group that's having to cope with the change and cope with the complexity of change and of competing demands, continual competing demands that I can remember from the police service just from 7 years ago when I was in the police. I'm sure it's even more tiring and difficult and challenging now because the demands are more complex. They're just increasing in complexity. So what I liked about what Chris talked about was how it's important for the manager, the leader, the sergeant or inspector, to pay attention to what's going on in the group. And actually this should be seen as data. What is going on in the group should be seen as really important data that you should be really, really interested in. And I'm reflecting on the discussions I used to have with my sergeants and PCSOs and constables and other partner agencies and members of the community. I know a lot of people would have said that those discussions, those conversations, were sort of navel-gazing and pointless because they don't actually lead to an outcome, they don't actually lead to a thing. But a lot of it was about building up relationships. And now I've sort of read and heard of Chris Moles' work, I'm thinking, actually, I did treat it as data, although I probably didn't formally call it data. But I was paying attention to what's going on because I felt as though it was really important. The relationships that didn't exist and the relationships that did exist, I needed to pay attention to what was going on and try to think about some of the reasons why the relationships weren't what they were, why some of the relationships were what they were. And certainly that concept of not always getting what I wanted, 100% of the time. I think if I got what I wanted about 10 or 20% of the time, I was probably doing quite well. So this paying attention to ourselves as a group, as Chris talked about, he talked about creating a space to be able to have these discussions that may not have an agenda, that may just start off with the inspector or sergeant saying, so how's it going? How's it going, everyone? And then just paying attention to the discussion that naturally flows from that, how's it all going? And facilitating that discussion and plumbing the depths of the things that are said, both the good things and the worries and the fears and the emotions and the ideas. If we think we're going to innovate and change, we're not going to innovate and change because of some strategic direction from the Chief Constable. We're going to innovate and change because of what goes on the ground. I remember one of my superintendents years ago saying it's a sergeant's war out there. He didn't mean, it's perhaps a poor metaphor, but I got what he was saying, that, and I realised this as an inspector, that it doesn't matter how good you are at thinking that you're in command and you're in control, if your sergeants aren't on board, if your sergeants don't share your vision, if your sergeants aren't, I'm going to use this phrase, in alignment with your thinking, although can they ever really be in alignment? Can we all really be in alignment with each other? I don't know, because we're all incredibly diverse and complex and different. But unless all of those things happened, nothing happened. Everyone would do whatever they thought was the right thing to do, or they would follow in the sergeant's footsteps. And so the sergeant, the rank of sergeant, is so important. Everything falls apart without the sergeants, honestly. I know some of you may say, well, everything falls apart without the constables, but it's such a critical position. And if we don't get our relationships with our sergeants right, and if the constables haven't got good relationship with the sergeants, it all falls apart. And I've seen this happen. I've seen this happen when you've got a toxic relationship between inspector and sergeant, or other sergeants between each other, and it's not good for the team. So some phrases which I quite liked: no agenda and no one in charge. And this is where I'm going to come to police canteens, Sunday morning breakfasts, and camaraderie. Talk about what we need to talk about as a group, and this might be about people leaving, joining, struggling, and what's the impact on the group, what's the effect on the group. And you know, I'm not suggesting for one moment, and neither is Chris or any of the other individuals who I've read up the sort of theories on strategic management and management at the sort of coalface, if we can use that no one's suggesting that we spend lots of time having these deep conversations about what's going on. But I think we do need to create some time to have them. Because when there's strong feelings in a team, and there's anxiety in a team, and there's worries and there's concerns, and there's in-groups and out-groups, and relationships that are going toxic, if we don't do something about those, then we're in trouble. And I've been on teams where the relationships have been bordering on toxic, and it's been really, really difficult to get anything done because the relationships aren't there. There's too many worries, too many anxieties, too many people just pissed off. And as sergeants and inspectors, I believe it's our job, I say that, the royal hour, I've been out of it now for 7 years, but I believe it's our job to ensure that we create the right environment for people to get the things done that need to get done. I hope this is making sense for you folks. So what I'm suggesting is that actually police canteens served a much higher purpose than the bosses thought when they decided it was a good idea to get rid of them. Because what Chris got me thinking of, and the conversation with Tony got me thinking of, is how in years past, I would learn some of the art of policing from sitting in the police canteen. Now, I know in so many ways they might have been a slightly toxic environment themselves, because there was the in table and the out table, and there was also a senior officers' mess where the inspectors and above sat. So there's a good form of elitism straight away. But it was a place where I could sit down and I could talk to detectives, and the traffic department were there, and the dog handler would come in, and there's members of staff from all over the station, from all sorts of different departments. It was a melting pot where we could talk about stuff, where you could get to know people, where you could express you're pissed off. You could talk about your feelings. You could talk about something that's gone well. You could discuss what's going on in your team and the wider team. Now that then got me thinking about when police canteens were closed down, where was the space to be able to do that? And I reflected back on some of the things that I created, which is, one of them was an insistence on the last set of nights, someone, often me, does a kebab run into rush hour, no matter where I was based. Okay, it might have been out of division, but I was the inspector and I said so there, because we had this funny rule, you weren't allowed off division unless you had permission. Well, I granted the permission, and I did it myself sometimes. Just go and get kebabs for everyone, and we'd sit around and we'd talk. And that gave me the opportunity to listen. And it's the same with Sunday morning breakfast. So Sundays of earlies, I used to make it really clear that the inspector and the sergeants are going to cook breakfast. Actually, one of the sergeants was awful at cooking, so he was excused. He could keep the wheel on. But we'd cook breakfast, and people would come in, and we'd invite the duty senior officer to come and join us. And this is where we created that space. Because I think within the police service, if you try and create something that's too formal, if you try and create a space to say that, you know, today we're going to have a discussion about our feelings and emotions, and there's going to be no agenda and no one's going to be in charge. I can imagine the looks of horror on the police officers thinking, oh my God, I want to go off sick. I didn't sign up for this. This is not training school. This is an operational police station. Go away. I can imagine the looks of horror. But those Sunday morning breakfasts and those kebabs on the last set of nights, or someone will bring a curry in or a chili or something. The cakes, the birthday cakes, the cake finds. These are the moments, I think, where you can create some space. These are the times where we can just ask that question, how's it going? And you might be thinking, what other questions can I ask that are going to lead me as a supervisor, as a sergeant, as an inspector, to get useful data about what's going on in the group, so I can pay attention to the feelings and the emotions that are going on in the group. Now, in the next video in this series, I'm going to share with you a model of asking questions in a very purposeful way that will help facilitate that conversation. And it's based on a theory of an organisational development theory, something called appreciative inquiry. So I'm going to share that with you, but if you want to watch that and listen to it, and by the way, it's not just theory for me, it's practice. I've utilised it on so many occasions, both within my teams, within a partnership setting, as a consultant to police forces and councils, in work I've done with the European Union, and in communities as well, treating the community as an organisation and looking to see what we can do to help develop it and create the space to have the important conversations that are needed to allow people to reflect and think about where they are and where they need to be. So next video, I'm going to share that with you, but I'm going to tease you here a little bit. It's going to be in the In-Force Advancement Group. This is a new group I've set up for those of you who are keen to and enthusiastic to develop your careers and push your careers to be all you can be, to be the best version of yourself that you can be. So far, there's so many of you who've joined already. I'm looking forward on Monday. By the time you're watching this, it might be beyond Monday. It might be months and weeks away, and we've run several of them. But every week, a 2-hour interactive webinar where we can pay attention to where we are now and where we need to be. And I can help you with my guidance and support and enabling you to come up with ideas, and also sharing ideas with you about how you can develop your career so it can be just totally awesome, fulfilling and successful. It involves a 5-step process, really simple. Forget PDR and its 36 pages of guidance. Forget trying to develop your weaknesses. We focus on developing our strengths. Our focus is on our strengths. If you focus on your weaknesses, at best you're just going to be mediocre. And why would you want to focus on your weaknesses when you're applying for a job where you want to play to your strengths? Does that make sense? Anyway, that's a topic of another conversation. So if you'd like to join that group, there's a link below. I'm going to share with you a really useful model which you can try out in the workplace tomorrow, based on appreciative inquiry, that will help you in a very non-threatening way, in a way that won't cause anxiety, or what's he talking about, or why is she talking like that? Why is she talking in a funny way? It's not going to do any of that. It's a very natural way of having a conversation that helps people discover something about themselves and will help you discover something about your team. Now, hopefully all of this has made sense. I know it's a long video, this one, but there's even more ideas here for me to talk about. Thank you, Chris Moles, by the way, for sharing some of your dialogue and thoughts with me. Like I said, I do find them really interesting, but also keeping complexity complex. I mean, really? Try and simplify it for people who are doing the important work of managing and leading. Let's have a look at level 2 again. So during this space that we're going to create, we are going to be able to consider perspectives of people from a wide range of backgrounds. You're going to have to adapt your style and approach according to the needs of the people you're working with. This culture, creating this space and listening carefully to what's going on, will encourage diversity, value diversity. It will encourage challenge. We want to encourage challenge. We want to develop an environment where it's okay to disagree. Because if everyone's agreeing with me, then what's the point of me? You know, what's the point of me? What's the point of me as an inspector or a sergeant if everyone's agreeing with me? I want people to disagree. Actually, it's one of the things I said to my sergeants as an inspector my wonderful days at the Sale Neighbourhood Policing team, that I need my sergeants to disagree with me if they genuinely do, and I need them to be open and confident to be able to share that disagreement with me. There's nothing new about that. Alexander the Great did this brilliantly. He was a master at this, the art of encouraging dialogue and discussion and conflict and disagreement so that he could make the best decisions. We're going to encourage reflective practice, among others. Some of you might have been scratching your head thinking, what is this reflective practice? The model I'm going to show you is reflective practice. It absolutely is. And taking the time to support others to understand reactions and behaviours. This will absolutely do it. And the best thing about it is you can do it over a chili con carne, a kebab, or a Sunday morning breakfast. And this is also going to enable you to demonstrate that you're taking responsibility for the emotional well-being of those in your teams. So there you go, folks. Being emotionally aware. I think when you try and put these values and behaviours from the CVF, I know I joke about the Wheel of Fortune, not the Wheel of Fortune. Now I've said that, I'm going to have to show you what I mean, aren't I? Sorry, it's in black and white as well. The Wheel of Confusion. That's the Wheel of Confusion that's in there. And this again is written in a language which I think is overly complex and will not make sense to most of you. It doesn't make sense to me. And I've studied this stuff to master's level. I geek out on this stuff. I've been geeking out on this stuff for the past 20 years. And I don't understand some of what the College of Policing are on about. I'm not even going to try and show you the flowcharts from the PDR guidance. But anyway, there you go. Being emotionally aware. It'll tick all of those boxes. I'd love for you to come and join us and just join the discussions where we're going to talk about how you will do this in practice. And it's going to enable you to just completely floor the assessors at your board. When you start talking about some of these concepts and start talking about your experience of doing some of the things that we are going to discuss in our weekly workshops, they're going to be looking at you thinking, where did that come from? This is beyond anything you're going to get at the training school with its flip charts and bullet points and lists of things that you're going to do when you return to the workplace. This is about the art of communication and the art of being able to enable people to be the best versions of themselves that they can be. I'm still looking forward to sharing some of this with you. I'm really excited. Anyway, almost 30 minutes long video, folks. Unheard of. But these are complex. No, they're not complex. These are things that I think are worth talking about. Actually, they're not simple. Well, no, they are simple. The idea, I think, is something about complexity. The more you look at it, the more you think about it, the more you work with it, the simpler it becomes. We don't need to keep complexity complex. Kebabs, Sunday morning breakfasts, bring back the police canteens. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye for now.